The city of Ironvale thrummed with life, a sprawling tapestry of steel and glass woven with the ceaseless rhythm of footsteps, car horns, and distant sirens. On a bustling corner of 7th Avenue, where vendors hawked roasted chestnuts and commuters jostled past, a small cardboard box sat unnoticed against a graffiti-streaked wall. Its flaps were tattered, stained with the grime of a city that never slept, and inside lay a creature so small it seemed the world had forgotten him entirely. The puppy was barely 5 weeks old, scruffy bundle of black and tan fur with eyes. That held the weight of abandonment. His whimpers were faint, drowned by the cacophony of Ironvale's morning rush. He shivered in the late January chill, his tiny body curled into a ball, as if to shield himself from the indifference of the street. The box, once a container for canned goods, was now his only refuge, a fragile barrier against a world too vast and cold for one so young. Across the street, in a narrow alley lined with overflowing dumpsters, a pair of amber eyes glinted in. The shadows. Saffron, a lithe orange tabby, with a coat like autumn leaves, padded silently along her usual morning route. She was a creature of habit, slipping out of her human family's apartment each dawn to explore the city's underbelly. Before returning to her kittens, Saffron's life was one of quiet contentment, a warm bed, a doting family, and 4 newborn kittens who filled her days with purpose. But this morning, something stirred in the air, a sound so soft it might have been a whisper of the wind. Saffron paused, her ears twitching. The sound came again, a plaintive cry that tugged at the deepest part of her being. She followed it, her paws light on the cracked pavement, until she reached the cardboard box. The scent of fear and milk hit her first, sharp and urgent. Peering over the edge, she saw him, the puppy, trembling, his eyes wide with a terror that needed no translation. He was alone, impossibly small, and far too young to be without a mother. Saffron's heart, already softened by the demands of her own kittens, surged with an instinct she couldn't ignore. She leaped into the box, her movements graceful despite the cramped space, and pressed herself against the puppy. His shivering eased as her warmth enveloped him, her soft fur a shield against the cold. The puppy's cries faded, replaced by shallow breaths as he nestled closer, finding solace in the steady rhythm of her heartbeat. Saffron curled her tail around him, just as she did with her kittens. And for the first time since he'd been left in the box, the puppy slept. The sun climbed higher, its rays cutting through the city's haze to warm the box. Saffron remained, vigilant, her eyes scanning the passers-by, who hurried past without a glance. She meowed, soft at first, then louder, hoping to draw attention to the fragile life beside her. But Ironvale was a city of noise, and her calls were swallowed by the din of traffic and chatter. As the heat grew oppressive, Saffron knew she couldn't stay. The puppy needed more than her warmth, he needed a home, food, and safety. And so, with a resolve that belied her gentle nature, she made a choice that would alter the course of their lives. Gently, she took the puppy's scruff in her mouth, her teeth careful not to harm him. He stirred but didn't cry, trusting her as she lifted him from the box. Saffron stepped onto the sidewalk, her senses sharp as she navigated the crowded street. The apartment she shared with her human family, Clara and Daniel, was 3 blocks. Away a short distance for a cat, but a perilous journey with such a precious burden. She moved swiftly, dodging feet and strollers, her eyes fixed on the familiar red brick building that loomed ahead. Ironvale streets were a labyrinth of sound and motion, but Saffron knew them well. She darted through an alley, her paws silent, on the cobblestones, and reached the fire escape that led to her home. The metal stairs were steep, rusted in places, but Saffron climbed with the grace of one born to the city's edges. The puppy dangled gently from her mouth, his tiny limbs limp in sleep. She paused at each landing, her ears pricked for danger. But the alley below was empty save for a stray newspaper tumbling in the breeze. At the 4th floor, Saffron slipped through an open window into the apartment. The scent of lavender and fresh laundry greeted her, a stark contrast to the city's grit. The living room was cozy, cluttered with books and mismatched furniture. but it was the corner by the radiator that held Saffron's world. A cardboard box lined with a soft blue blanket, where her 4 kittens waited. Their mews rose as she approached, a chorus of hunger and excitement. Saffron set the puppy down beside them, her movements deliberate, and watched as the kittens froze, their tiny noses twitching at the unfamiliar scent. The kittens named Ember, Sage, Willow, and Thistle by Clara were barely 3 weeks old, their eyes still adjusting to the world. They wobbled toward the puppy, curious but cautious, their fluffy tails flicking. The puppy stirred, blinking up at the strange creatures surrounding him. For a moment, Saffron tensed, ready to intervene. But then Ember, the boldest of the litter, nudged the puppy with her nose, and he responded with a tentative wag of his tail. Within minutes, the 5 were tumbling together. The kitten's playful swats met with the puppy's clumsy pounces. Saffron's whiskers twitched with relief. Her family had grown, and they had accepted it. As the morning waned, Saffron settled beside the box, her body a warm barrier between her charges and the world. The kittens nursed, their tiny paws kneading her belly, but the puppy hung back, his eyes fixed on the scene with a hunger that went beyond milk. He was too young for solid food, and his separation from his mother had left him weak. Saffron's heart ached at his confusion. After the kittens had their fill, she reached out with a gentle paw, guiding the puppy to her side. He hesitated, then latched on, his small body trembling with relief as he drank. Saffron purred, a low rumble that seemed to say, "You are mine." Now, the front door clicked open, and Saffron's ears swiveled. Clara and Daniel were home early, their voices carrying through the apartment. "Long day," Daniel said, his tone weary as he shrugged off his coat. Clara laughed, the sound bright and warm. "You say that every day, love?" They moved to the kitchen, the clink of a can opener signaling Saffron's usual treat. She rose, her instincts torn between her babies and the promise of food, but the puppy's soft whine anchored her to the box. Clara appeared in the doorway, her dark hair pulled into a messy bun. She was a graphic designer, her days spent coaxing beauty from chaos. Her love for animals was as fierce as her creativity. "Saffron dinner," she called, tapping a spoon against the can. Normally, Saffron would bound over, but today she stayed put, her eyes flicking between Clara and the box. Clara frowned, sensing something amiss. The vet had checked Saffron and the kittens just yesterday, but worry gnawed at her. She approached the box, her steps slow, and knelt beside it. Clara's breath caught as she peered into the box. A frong lay curled around her kittens, her amber eyes steady, but it was the 5th occupant that stopped Clara's heart. The puppy, nestled among the kittens, looked up with wide, trusting eyes. "Daniel." Clara's voice was sharp with shock. "Get over here." Daniel, a tall man with a quiet demeanor and a passion for woodworking, hurried over. He worked at a community center teaching kids to carve birdhouses and picture frames, but his true love was animals. He and Clara had adopted Saffron from a shelter 2 years ago, and she was pregnant and abandoned, and their home had become a haven for strays ever since. But this was something else entirely. What in the world? Daniel crouched beside Clara, his eyes widening as the puppy yipped softly. Saffron shifted, positioning herself protectively in front of the puppy, her tail flicking with warning. Clara pulled back, her hands raised. "Easy, girl," she murmured. "We're not going to hurt him." The couple exchanged a glance, their shock giving way to wonder. The puppy, sensing their attention, crawled toward them, his tail wagging furiously. Clara reached out, her movements slow, and scooped him up. He nestled against her chest, his warmth a stark contrast to the chill of the city outside. Saffron meowed, a low, insistent sound, and Clara gently returned the puppy to the box. Saffron licked his head, her tongue smoothing his fur as if to reassure him. "How did he get here?" Daniel asked, his voice hushed. The fire escape was too high for a puppy to climb, and Saffron's calm demeanor suggested she wasn't alarmed by his presence. Clara's mind raced. She must have brought him, she said, the realization dawning. She found him somewhere and carried him home. Daniel grabbed his phone, dialing the animal shelter where he volunteered. "Hey, Lisa, it's Dan. Any reports of missing puppies in Ironvale?" Lisa, the shelter's director, sighed. "No missing puppies, but we've had a spate of abandonments. Boxers, alleys, even a trash bin last week. People get dogs for Christmas, then ditch them when the novelty wears off." She urged Daniel to bring the puppy in for a checkup, and he agreed. Hanging up with a grim expression, Clara eyed the pet carrier in the corner. But Saffron's earlier protectiveness gave her pause. "She won't let us take him without a fight," she said. Daniel nodded, recalling a trick from their shelter days. He grabbed a tube of salmon paste, a treat Saffron adored, and squeezed a dollop just inside the carrier. Saffron's nose twitched, and the puppy, catching the scent, toddled toward it. Clara coaxed him gently, her voice a soothing hum. "Come on, little guy." The puppy stepped into the carrier, and Saffron F.